pressure on the government to utilize these modernized digital kind of economy. For example, I can think of, say, companies asking government to adopt, say, customs procedure, which can be done digitally, for example, like you said. And so pressure coming from private sector, I think is very important because there may not be enough incentive for government to do so by themselves. And of course, pressure from the private sector can maybe contribute to the changing government policy. And another thing is, say, privatization of government services. I'm thinking about, postal services in Japan. It was done, in the government before. I guess Prime Minister Koizumi privatized this postal services. And then they introduced many these technological developments, including reading postal codes by digital machines and so on. That led to improvement in efficiency, better services. So I guess privatization is another possibility. And also, finally, e-government. I know maybe other countries as well. If you file your tax returns digitally, you get some credit, or you can get lower fees. So if there's an incentive for citizens to use digital method to receive government services, then of course that will lead to more demand for services as well as supply of services. So there are, I think, several ways that you can try to see whether a certain method can help government use digital economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. With this, I'm sure our three other distinguished panelists must have many things to say, but unfortunately, time is running short. So I would like to finish this session, and maybe during the coffee break, you can ask questions to other panelists about their presentations. With this, I just want to repeat my request, which I said at the beginning of this session. Questionnaire is very important for us. So I would like all of you to hand in your questionnaire filled in the box outside the room. With this, could you please join me in applauding to them for their excellent performance. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we thank the chair for leading us in this very interesting discussion in this afternoon. And we break for tea and come back at 16:40.
We start the session. We are well in time now. This session is extremely important and substantive in terms of how the new growth theory and the prospects for economic development be addressed in light of our growing commitment for sustainability. As you know, here we are focusing on sustainable development goals, but sustainable development goals in times of crisis for multilateralism, how we would succeed in terms of addressing both multilateralism and our commitment for sustainability. So that is an important point that we can consider. Another important dimension which has come up is in terms of variable geometry that we see in kind of groupings that are coming up in terms of regional, in terms of sub-regional cooperation. So how this variable geometry is coming up in light of the pertaining, particularly the crisis which is getting sustained for multilateralism, how we are going to go forward, what kind of alliances are possible, and as was mentioned from the floor a while ago, alliances which are national in character, which are regional in character, which are sectoral in character, how we can go forward. And SDGs in times of new technologies. We heard in the previous session several interventions where Professor Urata and everybody else in that session talked about how technology is transforming the way production and services are structured. So from that perspective, how we are going to go forward. Friends, as you would know, there are several efforts by countries when they are trying to work on their development strategies in light of their commitment for sustainable development goals. And while I was going through literature, I found several new terms describing this idea of connecting countries and their development priorities. I could think of 7 terms which have come up around this debate, which I think mutually sort of substitutable, but interesting to see how people are trying to see bringing everyone within the part of what is called as inclusion, or leaving no one behind. The first is localization, so localization of SDGs. Then you talk about alignment with SDGs. Third is indigenization of SDGs. Fourth is integration with SDGs. Fifth is mainstreaming of SDGs. Sixth is adaptation with SDGs. And seventh is nationalization with SDGs. So you find lot of governments, lot of international agencies, civil society organizations, various entities are trying to use terms and references whereby how we can address these sort of goals and eventual outcomes as part of our larger take on how we move forward with SDGs. What methodology we adopt for taking forward the indicators, because you have goals, you have targets, and you have indicators. So how you bring in indicators which are relevant to you. And those of you who are working on indicators or on SDGs would realize the fact that within indicators also we have 3 tiers. And the first tier is one where all the members of the United Nations could agree. And tier 2 are the indicators where the agreement is there, but no indicators are identified. And third tier is of those indicators where neither you have indicators nor you have agreement. So goal 17, goal 16, which are extremely important goals, they are simply not there. Yesterday I was in Dhaka, and we had a meeting for South Asia on how South Asia should go forward, and we had people from Maldives and from Sri Lanka. They were talking about these conflicts and situations where specific indicators are not devised. So how we go forward is important. Innovation and goal like 8 and 9 play an important role, and so is the goal for 6, where we talk about water. So SDGs are for cross-domain connect. If you are deciding for something, as Ambassador Sinha asked today about agriculture. So if you talk about agriculture, you cannot talk about agriculture anymore without taking into cognizance water intensity, the virtual water export that you end up with. And in India, we have a huge debate about this northern state of Punjab growing rice, because the wastage of water is huge. And while we can grow rice in the areas where water is not that difficult in terms of access. So how we bring in technology? There are lessons we can learn from ASEAN. and I would be turning to our colleagues from there. ASEAN Vision 2025 has been aligned with the vision for 2030. It reflects the key elements of SDGs. So how we can learn from ASEAN when we talk about heart of Asia, Afghanistan, so Central Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, when we talk about their connectivity, seamless trade among these countries, how we view issues related to poverty, inequality, hunger, a shortage of decent work, and social security related issues. And then as more and more countries now are trying to address the multidimensional character of poverty, how we bring in those. So in light of this backdrop, there are 4 questions that we have placed to all our speakers, as you might have seen in the booklet which is in your folders. We are trying to identify what critical challenges our panel looks at in terms of looking into SDGs for the region. Second question is how to define that holistic approach which is required in multidimensional dimension of poverty that we are intending to address. Third is more about livelihood and skills and how we address the bottom of the pyramid, the lower end of the pyramid. And then the fourth is bringing in mechanisms to focus on regional public goods. And one important limitation is how the inequality is to be addressed. So in some of our economies, as growth has multiplied, inequalities have also multiplied. And this is one important dimension we would also be taking up in this panel. So I would stop here. I would invite Dr. Jose Rizal Demery from CSIS. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sachin Satuperdi. Since I'm the first speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to set the context. So I'm going to talk in a general context about the sustainable developments, the importance and also some issues in Asia Pacific. But a disclaimer, I'm not an expert in this sustainable development as my colleague here, Dr. Chatuperdi, who already very well known as one of the experts on this issue. But let me start by looking at the notions that these regions has been growing very well. Actually, the East Asia and Pacific, including also India, has emerged as the fastest growing regions. It's easy to get economies that grow at an annual rate of more than 5%. It also led to a greater convergence among economies in the region. So the inequality is actually declining in the regions, this graphic that I try to use to look at how the economies actually start converging. And it's already increased the livelihood of populations. As you can see, the number of poverty living under poverty lines has been declining very substantially. But not only in terms of number, also in terms of proportions. In the late 1990, for example, it is easy to see countries that has the poverty rate up to 25 or 30%, but now it is much easier to get a country with a poverty rate less than 10%. But of course, the number of people living in poverty is still big, or especially those living in the vulnerable situations. They might not be poor, but any shock, certain shocks can be significant to them and then make them poor again. So despite this good progress, we can see that the inequalities has been increasing, as you already mentioned before. The region has witnessed a significant increase in inequality, and it turns out that the countries growing faster tend to increase their inequalities. Inequalities and this is going to be very important. It already negatively impact economic growth. I think many economists now agree that it has a direct impact to economic growth, but it also make the poverty alleviations, poverty reductions getting harder. That's why if we look at the poverty rates in those countries, in the regions, it's stuck around 7% or 6%, and it's more difficult to reduce it even more. And of course, it also leads to activities that harms environment. This is a very important notion that we need to look at even more. And mostly that's because of inequality in opportunities. This is a figure from the UN ASCAP that shows how the children from low-income families will be more likely to drop out from school, and how children from the higher income family is more likely to get the secondary or even tertiary schools, tertiary educations. We also have low access to healthcare and basic services. They are, in many countries, they are still very lag behind in sufficient access to sanitation and clean water. And as I mentioned before, the environmental impact is also quite significant. This is I give you the case of my country, Indonesia, where the forest deforestation is very bad. It happens in one of the islands of Borneo, where during the last 30 years, from 73 to 2013, it lost almost half of its forests, turned into other economies.